Hello. Hi, everyone. It's back. It's been, I think, actually years at this point, but the book club is back. How is everybody? Can you hear me? I see some of you already preempting me and saying that you can, but I need to hear it before I feel confident in it. How is everyone? We're trying a bit of a day stream. So, to see how that goes. And of course, if anybody misses it, as always, I'll leave it up and you can catch up when you have the time. So today we're going to be looking at not all of this. This is Something is Killing the Children, book 1. This is the deluxe edition version, but we're going to be looking at volume 1, which contained chapters 1 to 5. And there's a reason for that, because initially this series was supposed to be 5 issues, and then it very much evolved and changed. I have a lot of also quotes and the like for this, and I went back to 2019 because that's when this series first started to get some of those. Then this is from 2021, and it also has some interviews in the back, and it's interesting to see the what stayed the same, the difference in like some of the answers and the like. So we'll go through some of that as well. And of course, I guess the first question is who is here currently has read it, and what did you think? Did you vibe with it? Did you not? Thoughts, feelings, questions, all of those things. How do you feel about the title? I remember that was something that was discussed a fair bit with the Something is Killing the Children. For some, they feel it's very, I guess ear catching, eye catching, both. Or for others, it sounds like the elevator pitch became the title itself. So where do you land on that? Was that something that you saw it and instantly it made you intrigued or not? I'm seeing everybody's just coming in. Hello, hello, hello to everyone who's been able to make it. Alcidre, thank you very much. Hey, I love seeing comics that aren't part of the big two. Oh, I'm so glad. I love spotlighting them when I can. Which there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on out there. For those who aren't aware, this is still going. It's had spin-offs. Somebody's Killing the Children is at issue 40, I believe. And what's interesting is the latest arc has been a series of one-shots with Erica Slaughter, who is the main character on the road. And that was initially what the series was going to be before it kind of changed and evolved as it was being written. And then you also have the House of Slaughter spin-off series, and then there are the Books of Slaughter. And I also believe there's something that's running in Hello Darkness, a short story there as well. So there's a lot. This universe is definitely expanded. So if you're just coming to it, there is a lot to dive into. So let me give you some of the basics. I wrote some things down this time because this is, we're trying to be slightly proper here. So I'm going to look at my notes. That's what I'm looking at. I'll also, while I'm doing that, pull up the first cover for you, this was the first cover, which I really like this one. One of the things I will hold against this a little bit is that it doesn't have the original covers as you're going through it chapter to chapter. It just has the big blank and then the next chapter. So I would like those, but it does have those exciting interviews in the back. So that makes up for it. And they also, for Feral, did a homage cover to this with the kitties, which was super cute. Peyton is asking, have you checked out any of the spinoffs? Yes, I have. I have been keeping up with the spinoffs. This is one of those series that I've just been reading but not talking about. There are lots of series like that. It just ends up happening. So for this is Something is Killing the Children. It's written by James Tynion IV. We have art by Werther Dell'Edera, and then we have colors by Mikel Muerto. And I have to say, the art for this, I think, very much matches everything that's going on. Here is one of the monsters. The monster design in a story like this is obviously something that's very important, and it's difficult to kind of match the buildup, especially when it's something that hasn't been seen. You're starting off with just seeing people ripped apart by it and the like. But I think this series does a pretty good job of having a decent monster reveal. You can see I actually have some bookmarks in this for once, and almost all of them are real bookmarks and not just chunks of something. This was the first big monster. Let me pull myself up if I'm going to do that. Boop. So you can see our nice big monster ripping something in half, probably demonetized, but it's okay. We're still gonna keep going. So I will read what the Boom synopsis is for this. This is being published through Boom. And so they have written, when the children of Archer's Peak begin to go missing, everything seems hopeless. Most children never return, but the ones that do have terrible stories, impossible stories of terrifying creatures that live in the shadows. Their only hope of finding and eliminating the threat is the arrival of a mysterious stranger, one who believes the children and claims to see what they can see. Her name is Erica Slaughter. She kills monsters. That is all she does. And she bears the cost because it must be done. So that synopsis very much feels like it came from a bit later on, because like Erica isn't even named right away in this series. She's not named, I think, until around issue 3 of it. Mostly for the first arc is focusing on, I'm going to call it an arc because chapters 1 to 5 very much encompass the fallout of the first monster attack. And you follow James, who is the survivor of this attack, as he encounters Erica, who is sent to the town to deal with it. And you see how it's impacted some of the other people. And it's very much the build up to the showdown with the first showdown with the monster. And you get to see a bit of how James is handling it and how Erica is handling it impacts how she's able to move through the town. So what's really interesting is one of the things that I noticed right away, even though it's something that James Tynion says he doesn't want foregrounded, but it's something that I noticed, is that James is a self-insert, the character of James, that is, who's the little kid there with the glasses. And because the book starts off with the question of what's the time you've been the most afraid? Let me actually pull it up so that we can get the direct quote from it. Page turning ASMR. So you start with the truth or there, and then the question is, what is the most afraid you've been? And so right away I noticed that I'm like, oh, this little boy is named James and looks like James. Is this self-insert territory? So of course I had to look it up, and it is, and there are some very interesting quotes about that, which I will read to you because I think they're very interesting. A little bit of a look into the process of what was going on here. Oh, hi, Shanti Fierce. You're taking a break from work to get spooked for spooky season. It's that time of year. So I'm going to read the quote that I have. This was initially from the Multiversity in Comics interview from 2019 when he's asked about it. And he says, it's really funny. When I started writing the book, I had this idea for this cold open that shows this game of truth or dare that we're looking at that goes horribly awry. And to get into the pacing and the sense of character I wanted, I just put myself and my friends that I used to have sleepovers with. I just put us all in the book. In my head, it was like, these will be filler names. Because sometimes when you're writing a creator-owned book, some of the characters come fully formed and some of them form themselves as you move along. So there was this character that was James in the script. And honestly, it was a decision I hadn't made in other books before. But by doing that, it opened the story up. It made me really feel for this tiny version of myself. And it made me really frightened for him. Even writing issue 2, I thought I was still going to change the name of the main character. But at a certain point, it just felt like, oh, I've gone too far. This character is now a tiny version of myself. And I just needed to lean in and let that happen. It's not something that I want people to read too much into. I'm so sorry. It's what I'm doing. In terms of the story being any more autobiographical than it seems. But the sort of person that this young character James is the same sort of person I was. The deep fear and anxiety that he experiences is an echo of the person I was, and in a lot of ways, the person I still am. So honestly, it was just a shortcut for emotional honesty that then became the main road. I'm honestly very excited to see where it all leads because it was not part of my original intent for the book. So that's what's going on there. And so I'm very curious as to how people feel about that, because lots of times you'll hear self-insert thrown around as a very much a pejorative, or that it makes the work weaker. So I'm curious, knowing that, do you feel that that happens here? Because in terms of this work specifically, I personally don't think so. Because what's really interesting is that you can see the shift occurring in terms of series direction as this is going on, as the protagonist focus shifts from the James character over to Erica. And it happens in such a way that it doesn't feel inorganic or anything like that. But just as you're reading it, you just really come to realize that really who you're going to be following is Erica, because all of the lore around her and what she's doing and the monster hunting starts to impact what's going on. And really, James is more of the focal points that you can see how the horror is impacting the children. And in that sense, it works quite well. And the two characters kind of bounce off of each other in the fact that you have him as the counterpoint to Erica, because at first he's assuming she's going to be some kind of savior there to help them, and she very much kind of subverts some of those tropes, and the fact that she's just so hardened and tired. And one of the fun things about Erica in that sense, though, is that it does actually impact how people treat her in the town. And I think that's one of the things that made it more manageable than it might have been otherwise, because in some ways she's falling into some fairly stereotypical, like, hardened female hunter character tropes. But because people actually respond to them and she has negative consequences for it, like she gets kicked out of places, people look at her suspiciously, it's actually a bit of a problem. And in that way, it builds into the story and it becomes something that sometimes she makes mistakes and she has to overcome things because of that. So in that way, it helps round Erica out. And I would say, even in this first arc, even though a lot of it is meant to be focusing on James and the other people in the town and some of the consequences they're suffering, she's arguably the more interesting part of what's happening, the monster hunting and all of those things. And just this first 5 chapters has more of that build up because all of the lore surrounding everything hasn't happened as of yet. So you're more in that classic kind of gotta hunt the monster down format. And you have some of the flashbacks to seeing what happened and the trauma that it's put people through. It's probably for the best that Erica becomes more of the focus, because in this first arc, you do have a lot of development that's happening with some of the other side characters, but ultimately you're not going to see most of them again. So far, time of streaming, that's what's been going on with a lot of what has happened. So I also wanted to discuss what the original focus was going to be. And for that, I have some of the things from in here, and they match what was said back in the 2019. There's gonna be a lot of page turning here. No, that's my second quote. That one doesn't have a proper bookmark. It has a torn page. So again, these editions have like interviews with pretty much everybody, which is nice. It's nice when you get to hear both the author and the artist and just as many people as you can. And some of the early interviews had the editor as well. That was really fascinating. I always enjoy hearing that kind of, I don't want to say dichotomy, but this relationship and what's going on there, because that can really alter how things play out, you know? So for this discusses how it was going to be initially, when it was going to be a 5-issue type thing. But this series did get a lot of hype building it up even before it was released. And so it was bumped up into being an ongoing. I don't know if you remember or were around for that time in 2019 where there was just lots of buzz around this series. So in 2021, he said, I wanted to write something that was the opposite of something I was writing for DC Comics. I wanted to do something quiet, understated, and frightening. At the beginning, I saw this as an experimental project. I wanted to write a book that was made up entirely of the sort of interstitial issues you'd get in the middle of a run of a long Vertigo Comics run. The sort of issues where Morpheus or John Constantine only show up for 3 pages at the end. A book where every issue has a different main character and has an encounter with this extraordinary, mysterious woman in different small towns around America. My pitch to Boom was to do it in a 5-issue miniseries where you catch 5 glimpses of this character who didn't have a name when I started writing the 1-pager. They were supportive. Then Werther came in with the character design, and I started writing the book, and I realized I was writing a very different comic book than the one I set out to write. And so you can, I think, definitely see that shift within the first arc, because it comes across quite decompressed and as if it was meant to, it comes across like it makes sense that it's longer than it is, but also that you could have compressed it into maybe 1 or 2 issues. But because of how it's spread out, it does kind of build out some of what's meant to be the dread. And I'm curious if that worked for you. Did it feel slow for you, or was it something where you felt that it was building up to this big monster encounter? Was it something that made you feel more excited for it? Because I think that having that big climax of the fight at the end of the 5th issue really works, but it works in a kind of trade waiting type sense. It reads very well in a trade format, which is how I initially read it. I didn't read it in the month to month. So I'm curious how all of you came to it and what you took from it. This series, to me personally, reads better in that way, in that kind of chunky format. I really like this book because it collects, in my opinion, all of the first arc, and that just has that all together. Loner Shark is saying, which is the least interesting bit by far, in my opinion. So, what did you think was the most interesting? Were you more interested in the lore building that comes as you learn more about the House of Slaughter and the Order of St. George and how all these people are hunting monsters and why, and more about Octo and them compressing their own monsters inside of themselves, those kind of things? Because there's much more layers. There are many more layers added to Erica as it goes on, and she becomes quite complex and interesting. And I think in the first arc, more of that complexity is going towards James or some of the other characters. And in a way, it's not that it feels wasted, because it does help that arc feel built out, but it doesn't have the same weight because you don't continue on with them. And there are certain characters where it just, some of the sequences I think are a little odd personally, and I'll get to those. But first, I want to talk about some of the paneling that they have here, because the paneling layout can be quite interesting. And it's a way that it really handles motion, I feel, quite well, in the way that the panels are cut and laid out. The colors are a bit on the dimmer side for certain moments. In fact, it's usually like the blood and the monsters that get a lot of the brightness, which I think helps with the atmosphere. But in terms of everything, most things feel pretty muted in terms of the day-to-day, and that suits the first arc, at least, because it is just after this murder of all of these children and everybody's really sad and shocked and the like. One of the things that's interesting here, and I'm not sure if it entirely worked for me, is the relationship that James has with other adults inside of the series, particularly the principal scene, where after he because there are some people who, even though it's not possible, they assume that he did it. All these kids died at his sleepover and he did it, even though people were ripped in half and all kinds of things. But and the principal just completely talks to him entirely inappropriately. And there are a lot of adults in this who just talk to him as if he's another adult, just outside of the position that they're supposed to have. And I think it's meant to be that it's supposed to humanize them and make them relatable. But to me, it just always made it feel, inappropriate. I was worried. I'm worried about this school. Like, even though in this situation where these kids are bullying James, who's just seen all of his friends die, but James is the one who screams the cuss word at the top of his lungs, and so he gets sent to the office. And then the principal is there telling him that he should have just beat that other kid up. And it just seemed like, even if the principal felt that, this other kid was in the wrong, I just feel like there were other ways to go about it. That entire sequence was a bit odd for me personally. Again, I think it might land differently for others, but it was one of the things where it just seemed that there was sometimes a bit of a disconnect between James being a child and the way certain adults were talking to him. It was definitely different with Erica. Erica came across a lot better in the interactions she was having with both him and just other people inside the town, because Erica's whole thing is just that she doesn't care. She doesn't care. She's there to kill monsters and the like. What do we think of Erica's character design? I think it's really cool. I like it a lot. I like how she's so tired that It even looks like it almost looks like makeup at points. She's just so raccoon-eyed. I feel, I feel seen, although there's no reason for me to look that tired all the time. Although I will admit, the first time I read through all of this, I was surprised about how old she was supposed to be, just that she looked very young to me. And so when she could see all of the monsters, I didn't even question it. I just assumed that she was young because one of the things is that children can see the monsters in this, but the adults can't. But then people kept making comments about what it was is when she goes first to the restaurant, the not Applebee's, and she orders a lager, and I was like, oh, I guess she's old. So oh. Yeah, Dinosaur Sprinkles is saying, I took it as the principal having a bit of a crisis, letting that spill out onto James. Inappropriate, but a trauma reaction. I think that's what it's meant to be. It's just for me, it just didn't land. That's the thing. Everybody's gonna approach and process things differently, and different things will land differently for different people. So here you get the sequence of her meeting James for the first time. And I think what really works here is how he attaches onto her because of how much he's just struggling with what happened and the fact that she seems like she could do something. And that relationship and the disappointment he starts to come to feel with how she is, I think is a really good moment of character growth, not for him because he goes away, but for her and her relationship with the environment. Each chapter tends to have a bit of a flashback to what happened at the sleepover with the children and just the brutality of all of it, which I will again show some of. And again, you can see how the colors here are brighter than they tend to be for some of the other moments. How did you feel about how the violence in this series was depicted? Did you feel that it lived up to what it was trying to do? Did you feel that it was too much? Oh, what's Peyton saying? Peyton is saying, now that you've brought up the adults, it's making me think that it was intentional, that the adults are so weird that they're incapable of protecting the kids, and only Erica can do something about it. There is an interesting quote that I found about the way the monsters and fear work in this universe that I think that I will share. Do I still have it up here? Here we go. Where he's talking about the fear and the way the kids experience it. And so he says, it does in an abstract way. James experiences an extraordinarily traumatic event that I can't liken to anything that's happened to me in my life because they're still talking about the self-insert aspect. And I don't want to trivialize real things by saying, oh, these other moments are like it. A lot of what they're facing, the monsters, are kind of the abstract horror of the world. I think that kids do perceive that abstract horror as something more concrete that hurts them. The abstract horror of society hurts kids in ways we don't understand. Kids see it much more clearly, something more concentrated, something more directly to fear. So that's probably playing into why kids can see the things. They understand that it hurts them, even though they don't understand what's hurting them. As you get older, it still hurts you, but you perceive it less because you know that society's broken for this, and that the other reason you no longer see as clearly that there's just this bad thing out there that could hurt or kill you. So that's one of the things that is discussed about the perception of the monsters, and that it's playing with that trope of, like, kids, they just have this other sense of being able to see things, in this case horrific things, although that's definitely evolved over the series because it doesn't come up so much in this first 5 chapters, even though you do see Erica talk to Octo, her little stuffed animal, who, as it turns out, is housing this force inside of it. But it kind of evolves more into something about them kind of creating their own monsters, which kind of is different than the horror of society thing. So it's interesting to definitely see how this series has grown and morphed. And I do think that over time, the overarching plots have helped it, but those tend more to do with Erica and all of her history. In terms of these first 5 as a setup for what's going on, I think they're a fairly strong hook. And I imagine most people coming to it these days would be reading it in that chunk format rather than in the issue to issue format. So, how did all of you come to it? Did you come to it as it was coming out and then collect it again later? Or was it something where you came to it a bit after? How did you hear about it? I'm curious because I definitely heard about it in the build up and the hype train of everything, but I'm just late to all things, so didn't get around to reading it until much later in that chunk. And so my reference point is always reading the first 5 all together. So I'm not entirely sure how it felt on the individual to individual issue. Anima is saying they found it on Global Comics. Yes, it is on Global Comics, and so is House of Slaughter and Book of Cutters. So it's very convenient if you want to go and catch up on everything that's there because there's a lot. There are many issues. How was the reading pace for you? Like, how quickly did you find that you were able to get through this? Was it the kind of thing where you just blew through it, or was it the kind of thing where you took your time, it was a bit denser, or some of the events were a bit heavy? So, what was your pace for this? For me, I definitely moved pretty quickly through it, but then went back and reread certain sections, particularly because there were some of the discussions surrounding, say, James and the boy that he liked and how he had that bit of guilt about how he was a bit more sad that that boy died than some of his other friends. And there was that tiny bit of a crush storyline that didn't really go anywhere because the kid died. One of the things you'll notice about lots of the relationships in this series overall, spoiler by the way, is that lots of them have one person in it who's dead. So that's a thing that keeps happening a lot for the characters. But I found I went back to kind of reread some of what the emotional connections were for certain people, because for some of them they were a lot clearer. Like James is very much fleshed out in his relationship with other people. But for others, like say Tommy, it was a bit looser, and some of the other people just didn't feel very fleshed out. Like there was the sheriff's brother who worked for like the morgue and who was always popping bubble gum, which was apparently worthy of a cover for one of them. I did not care for bubblegum popping, really callous, drunk morgue guy. I think I think for me, most of the characters I liked were James, Tommy, Beyond, who is the little girl who ends up, they find her with the monster in the cave, and then Erica. Also, Erica Slaughter is just, I think Erica Slaughter is a really fun name. It's very throwback. It is a very throwback type of name, and that seems to be intentional. You know, I have more quotes. I'm not done with the quotes. So, oh, Humongous is saying, I use the panel to panel to savor the storytelling and pace it out like a ghost story. Yeah, I can see panel to panel really letting you build in that way because then you get some of the monster reveals. Whereas sometimes when you're reading in a book like this, you can already see the reveal on the next page, which is why, especially if it's a monster, you got to have that really strong character design to carry it through. Which again, I do think the monsters for this are fairly solid. They do look like something that a kid would be afraid of, and they have that kind of loose kind of edge to them that I think works. The fact that they're usually bloody is also a nice touch for that. So the quote I wanted to read about some of the inspos is, so we have here, I think you can see Stephen King in the DNA of it being the story, really strongly. But honestly, really strongly, the other DNA that I think is a big part of it is horror comics. And I mean that in a very specific way. Books like Haxa Slash and things like that. Stories that bring in iconic comic book characters. Erica Slaughter is a larger than life character. She's a monster hunter. She has a very defined look that is basically a costume. And she's this extraordinary character entering the ordinary world. And that was a big part of the idea behind it. I wanted to take a character from a more almost balls to the walls late 90s slash comic and then drop them into a very grounded indie comic of today. I wanted this kind of discordance that is so built into the DNA of this thing. My friend Steve Orlando told me that when he read it, it reads like Hack and Slash meets Twin Peaks. I mean, if the goal was that, I think that's why some of the characters are so quirky, Personally, I didn't find them all that likable, and I think the characters in Twin Peaks, despite being incredibly, like, off the wall sometimes, for the most part, are fairly likable overall. Is that the vibe you got? Because a lot of people say they feel some of the Buffy vibes, especially with Erica, that she's giving them strong Buffy vibes. Some of you are talking about the panel to panel. Oh, that's interesting. Loner Shark, who is one of the people who was not as fond of this, is saying, I think it's the 90s comic stuff that I'm bumping against. It's funny because to me, I've been rereading a lot of 90s stuff lately. It just happened. It was largely because of reading Local Man. It didn't feel overly strongly 90s in that sense because the indie elements are overriding that. The focus is much more of her being impacted by this world than her changing it. Like the monsters and what she's fighting, they're just kind of there. And this is the world. She's just in it. And a lot of Erica's story is her kind of fighting against the system, really, that she's part of as this Order of St. George as it comes to be revealed. And there are some hints of that in the first 5 issues, and the fact that she's always blowing off her handler. She's always causing messes that they have to clean up, causing problems. In fact, some of the things that happen, some of the people who get hurt, the people who die, it is because of how she acts when she first comes to the town. And there are some very cold moments, especially for James, as you, the reader, come to realize fairly early on, something that he will realize later. It's that he's being used as bait. So it's just a rough time to be tiny self-insert James. Tyler Preston is saying, I never got the Twin Peaks vibes personally. Viola Ivy is saying, in terms of her role in the story, sure, they're Buffy vibes, but their personalities are very different. Yeah, Erica definitely has a distinct personality, and there's definitely less of the whole chosen one thing going on. And there's more than one of her. So there's a lot more than one. Some people are saying they feel disconnects from the characters. I think that this series overall reads better as a builder. There are lots more quotes that I have about how it evolved and changed and grew. And I think that especially the first arc, all these 15, it is 15, right? I'm not just saying that. I'm not imagining that it's 15 that I have here. Yes, it is 15. That you really get the strong sense of what the world is and who Erica is. And that comes to be very important because even within the first 5, she's coming more and more into the fore, and her elements are becoming more interesting than the James and the town elements that are starting to be pushed back into the background. And they're more supports and things that are building up the horror and the terror than things to be overly connected and concerned with. And the way that all this ultimately ends, I feel like caps that off, because in other stories there are certain things you would expect to happen, like certain characters you would expect to go in certain directions based on the options that are presented. I'm kind of trying not to spoil it too much, but they don't happen. And instead you're left with Erica very much, and less of what's going on with the town, those kind of things, because what's left is the more important element is the fact that there are these monsters out there that are killing children, and they're just a thing and they need to deal with it. And you kind of, because of that, it's kind of introduced the element of whether Erica's way is the best way or not, or whether there is merit to what the order is doing. But those things end up coming in, a bit later. Yeah, Buffy gets pretty gloomy after she dies. Season 6 is rough. Season 6 is rough. And then 7, you have all the other Slayers. So, yeah, is this season 6 Buffy? I mean, as we'll see later for Erica, I mean, in some ways she died. So. But overall, was this a story that you enjoyed? And did you find that the horror elements came through? Was it something that were you frightened, concerned, feeling that kind of horror while you were reading it? Or was it something that you felt further away from? Was it something that you were more intellectually fascinated in? Or something that you didn't really vibe with? Because I can see this landing a lot of ways for a lot of different people, depending upon either what you were expecting from it or how you can handle, seeing kids being brutally slaughtered and the like. I think the gore level works for this because especially because of the title. I mean, it's called Something is Killing the Children, and so I feel like you definitely got to have that happening when you have that as the title. If you're people who have just started, is this the kind of thing where you're like, "Now I'm in. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to be all the way up to issue 40 and House of Slaughter and all the tie-ins and all of those things." I see some of you saying it didn't really scare you, that it seemed more thrillery. I found it more interesting than scary. And it's when the world building and the lore started to really kick in, which started more after this first arc, to be honest, that I really got invested. But the first arc was enough for me to be interested. And what I was really enjoying was seeing the way that Erica's attitude and the like was impacting how she was able to handle things. And also, you did get some hints of her past in this first arc, like here, where you see some of the things that she's done. And, some of, especially the one panel there of her incredibly young amidst all of the monsters. And so right away, at least even from this first arc, you get a sense of why she is the way she is, which is good, especially when the character is so potentially abrasive. So I'm just flipping through a little bit to make sure that I'm covering all the stuff. Yeah, you get to see Octo in this. So what do we think about the design that she has there? I need to make you bigger. That needs to happen. There we go. So you finally get to see Octo, who's her little plushie that she's carrying around, that she's talking to, that I kind of want. It's kind of prugly, like pretty ugly. It's not the prettiest stuff. It's giving vibe. You know what it's giving vibes of? Can I get if I can find Octo? Octo is giving vibes of, remember that Powerpuff Girls episode where she has the little bubbles, has a little octopus, then him possesses it and it goes around and does all the stuff in the town of Townsville. That's what we're doing here with Octo. I know that the design for Erica's monster is still meant to be monstrous because one of the things is that she still wants it to be a monster to remind herself always of the things that it did to her and to her family. But I don't know. I thought it was kind of pretty in a siren of the sea kind of way. Maybe I'm strange. The one other thing I like about this big version is that you get to see the art so blown up. Yeah, you can see the seam of the pages. I know. You can tell I've read this more than once. The stitching is showing through. A lot of these stories, the horror stories, especially at the start for James Tynion, they've got a Wisconsin thing going on. Got some Stephen King Maine vibes. One of the other good things about Erica's interactions is that even though they feel a bit odd and off because of everything going on, that fits in a bit more with the fact that nobody knows what's happening. They just know that all these children are dying. And despite Erica's abrasiveness, her character design and the vibe and the look of her, it looks like it looks like she can get stuff done. At least to me. What about to all of you? Oh, here we go. We can see Octo better here. That's what I was looking for. There he is. And this kind of he monster thing. It's kind of cute. And this is one of the pages where you get to see the not Home Depot, the House Depot. There's a quote in the back of this about why some of the things are left vague, at least at the start. And it's really interesting to see because of how the story does evolve. But I wanted to read this one too, and I'll have to censor myself because there's some cussing in this one. Oh my goodness. I'm never sure how I'm supposed to read those kind of things in quotes because you don't have the entire tone, which is why I do kind of like in some interviews where they add things like laughs or clears throat in the sense that you can kind of almost at that point get a bit of a vibe for what's going on. But we're just gonna have to go with it. So in this, they're talking about the fantastic elements. He's being asked about the fantastic elements of the town versus the kind of real world thing, which is what they were talking about in that earlier 2019 quote about putting her, this 90s type character, into this more indie setting. And so this is a long one, but hold on, I think it's really interesting, which is this is James Tynion talking about the world building as of 2021. After 2 years of telling stories on a cosmic scale between Dark Knight's Metal, Justice League, and Justice League's Dark, I wanted to write the polar opposite kind of story. The way I put it to my editor when I was writing my second issue is that I wanted to be able to not have to effing explain everything. If a scene takes place in a bar, it takes place in a bar. Same with a gas station or an Applebee's, even though we had to rename it. That's me saying that. He didn't say we have to rename it. You don't need to establish which tier of reality you're a part of and how these great big cosmic beings are all operating on the same dimension. They got in a car and they went to Applebee's. You don't need an expository paragraph to make that tracks to a reader. They understand each and every one of the elements. I hate exposition. I hate it so much that I try to overdo it a bit in my superhero fiction to capture a kind of Claremontian feel. So at least I'm evoking something very comic booky that I love when I'm doing it, which has earned me some enemies among comic book critics. Enemies seems very strong. That's a strong word. But I understand it's necessity. You need to explain things to the reader, especially when you're writing a popular character and you're dealing with complicated continuity and a complicated world where super scientists, magicians, and aliens all coexist and wear costumes. But when you write the rules for your own book, you don't have to explain anything you don't want to explain. So I think that's really interesting because also as the books have gone on and now there are more people also coming on board, co-writing and the like, and other people adding to the universe, explanations have definitely become more necessary, I would say, and they've definitely been worked in. So it's again very interesting to go back and look at some of these things. That's one of the things I really love about having all the interviews and stuff there is you can kind of almost at some points track how the work is evolving and whether it works or doesn't work. How did all of you feel about the level of exposition, at least in the first 5 issues? I think that it was solid and it just leaned more into the mystery. There was a lot of like, ooh, what happened? It was intriguing. It wasn't annoying. There weren't questions left that needed to be answered. It wasn't the kind of thing where the questions that were left out there were harming the way that the story was being told. It was just kind of like, oh, like, ooh, I wonder what happened in her past. And I wonder why, like, some people can see monsters and others can't. And some of the questions, like what happened at the sleepover and basic things did unfold as the arc was going on. You got to see more of it. And that was a nice build. And then you had the very final bit of the fights inside of the cave. And the fight in the cave, I think, was very, very dynamic and very fun when you finally get to the monster's lair. And you get some really nice art and paneling here. Where's my bookmark? There we go. Because a lot of the action took place towards like the end of 4 and then lots of 5. And it felt very earned because the pacing. I felt that the pacing worked in that sense that when you finally got to this big fight, it felt like there had been a build-up to it. It's just one of those things that because so much focus was spent on James, I did expect that a bit more would be done with him long term, but I'm also not sad that it wasn't. I don't mind the original idea, and it's kind of fun because, as I said earlier in the stream, this latest arc is doing that. It's just little adventures with Erica going around doing things. But I think it's actually stronger now, years later, because of all the issues and the buildup and the world building. Now there's a bit more of an emotional impact when you see those adventures than there might have been otherwise, particularly the ones between her and her brother, Aaron, who I really like. I liked Aaron a lot. I like Aaron. I was glad that there was a whole arc for him in the House of Slaughter. More Aaron. So, for those of you who have read it and in and on and maybe more, what characters did you like? Who did you like? Did you end up liking, like really liking anybody in the town? Were there people that you really vibed with there, or were you someone who was more invested in Erica and the monsters overall? Yeah. Here's one of the other things. Like, so we're still in the fight in the cave. One of the other things I liked about Erica was the balance of her, in that while she was more competent and capable than the people in the town, she wasn't infallible in any way, and she got hurt, and it made it clear that it was dangerous. I think that really sold some of the danger of the monster, that even the people or the person who was coming to kill it, was still having a hard time. Dinosaur Sprinkles is saying, I liked James, Tommy, and Tommy's mom. Tommy's mom was interesting. I did think there were some interesting things going on there, and that whole thing just ended up being quite sad at the end of the day. There were some elements of it, I think, that really landed in the emotional part, but they were more surrounding just the mourning aspects and stuff for me. I see some of you're saying, though, like, I was mainly invested in Eric, or I could sympathize. That's a really interesting thing that you're saying there, Viola. I could sympathize with James, and Erica is cool, but I wouldn't say I'm super invested in any of the characters, but it's just volume 1. I think I would agree with that, for me, at least for volume 1. I was definitely invested in the situation more so than the characters, but the person I was the most interested in was Erica. But that's not to say that what was done with James was done poorly or anything, because there were some moments where you really understood what had happened to him and why he was so sad. But it's just, I felt more of that connection towards just Erica, and then later beyond a little bit when they finally get to her. Dante, because Dante's read further, is saying this is jumping ahead into later volumes, but there will be a kid that will be the only character outside of Erica that I become attached to. Dante, would you perhaps be talking about Gabby? If we ever do get to Gabby, that'll be interesting. I don't know. I did not care for Gabby personally, but that's just me. That's a me thing. So what we have here is one of the flashes, where this is one of the more intriguing bits, I think, where Tommy is given the ability to see, and it's sadly not through sunglasses or anything like that. No, it's through a shot to the head. And he gets a glimpse into like the House of Slaughter. And there's just something really cool about this image of all these masked individuals, like these menacing individuals with these plushies. And so I think it's at moments like this where the world building starts to really kind of come to the fore and take over from that individual storytelling kind of thing, at least in this first arc. Yeah, this is Tommy's big moment, where Tommy gets to have a big hero moment after coming to try and take out Erica, which was incredibly justifiable because she was acting acting really sus. So it's fair that someone would be kind of, concerned as to what was going on. Cam Dog is saying, I definitely don't like that council. I know, you can tell right away that nothing good will come of the council, despite their little plushies. It's one of those things where if this book was aimed slightly younger, I think you could sell some of those plushies. I don't know why I'm always looking at things and like, would that make a good plushie? Like plushies, I don't need any plushies personally. And yeah, I looked at Octo, it's like that would be a cute plushie. I mean, I guess it would be good for if you were doing a cosplay as well. Because Erica is like a nice, fun, simple cosplay. Peyton is saying, I'm definitely intrigued to see where the story goes with Tommy after volume 1. So that's cool. It's cool to see that some of you are interested in carrying on with it. For those of you who have read this, have you read many of James Tynion's other horror works? Because he does a lot in that genre in general. Dinosaur Sprinkles is saying, selling the chainsaw to Eric was certainly a thing. That chainsaw scene, if that happened in the store, calling the cops right away. Like, I need the chainsaw that does the most damage and cuts through the most things and is the most dangerous for reasons. Also, I'm here at the store with the child who some of you think perpetrated this mass murder of all these children. It's fine. It's definitely fine. Oh, Humongous, no need to apologize. I do recognize you from the comments. No, it's nice. I appreciate comments. It's even on the older videos, like especially, it's nice to see that, people still have things to say about them. That's one of the things I value the most about this channel is being able to have, discussions and moments and things like this. I think it's really cool. I thought I heard him. I can hear Alvin. I'm amazed that he's left us alone for this long. To be honest, very surprised. I guess he must assume we're about to talk about Nightwing or something. That's usually when he shows up. Oh, this is a great shot. This one here of her fighting the monster. I'm trying to make it a bit less reflective for you. Yeah, I think the ending of this, because I've flipped through to the end of chapter 5, which is where you have the fight and so many people are hurt. Tommy's hurt. James got shot just by Tommy. And the officer who is trying to keep them out has taken them to the hospital. And then you have the setup at the end here with Erica. And this is a great panel of Erica right here, where she's calling in and she says that now there are children of the monster and that even more children are going to die. So how do you feel about Erica as a heroic protagonist? Do you feel she is heroic? Because in the lead up to this, when I was posting some of the we're going to do this, some people were arguing that they felt that maybe she was the antagonist, and I thought that was an interesting way to look at it. So how do you feel about that? Nightwing, you see Nightwing appeared in the chat. Now Alvin's here. I did feed the cats. He just always comes. Cooney, have we decided the next month book? No, not yet. I always put the votes up for the next month after I've done the stream for the current month, because things are more organized now. But there was a time when sometimes I'd be late or, those kind of things. So I like to do it after. I already know what I'm probably going to put on for the vote for next month. I know 2 of them at least. I know that 2 of the options, like one of them is going to be the first volume from the latest Conan run from Titan Comics, and one of them is going to be the complete Rook Exodus. Those are going to be 2 of the choices. And then I'm deciding on a couple of others. But we shall see. I'm very curious about what people will pick. All of them are things I want to talk about. That's the one thing I'll do for myself. My one conceit is they're all things that I want to discuss with people, or I'm interested to see what people think about it. So it's always fun from that regard. But I'm always nervous, and I don't know why. I'm always very nervous before the book streams. I think it's because I have to announce them. And so in that way, I'm always worried that something's going to go wrong. If you've been here a while, I feel like there's like the live stream curse about announcing things. Peyton is saying, I loved the purchasing the chainsaw scene. My favorite moments have been seeing Erica interact with normal people and frightening them with how blunt she is. I do like that about Erica as well, that there's just something off about her just because of all the things she's seen and done. She's not even really trying all that much to fit in because she just is so different and warped because of what happened to her as a child, as we'll learn, the monster hunting and the organization and all those things. I feel like it fits. But one of the things she's going to go through is having to, let some of that empathy and stuff that she still has, be a bit more prominent. And you do see some of that, a tiny bit, in her interactions with James. Not even necessarily in what she does, but in the things she doesn't do. You can see those as moments where she needs to evolve. Andrew Lopez is saying, I think that's where it's taking her character. She was cool in the beginning, more sympathetic and heroic now. Yeah, I'd argue so, especially after the second arc, what's going on there. And some of the things in the flashbacks you see with her and Aaron, like I like her and Aaron a lot. Fumo is saying, as someone who usually wakes up to your streams, the announcements help me keep up, especially in my time zone. Yeah, I know everybody is in a different space. So it's interesting to do it at different times when I can, because you do see different people, which is always fun. It's always nice to get to see, people who I see commenting and the like. I always really appreciate it. Tyler Preston is saying, video topic suggestion, going over the Marvel Mangaverse. It was terrible for the most of it. Ninja Spider-Man was the only liked character of it. Well, there are definitely lots of things to talk about. If you want to hear something funny, a little bit behind the scenes that I find funny anyway, it's that the Nightwing video I did about questioning whether that little series that they're doing on the verticals is exploitative or not moved into the #1 video I've posted in a while overnight. I was like, the people every time they say they don't want it, but then the Nightwing booty, they can't resist clicking on it. It just made me chuckle a little bit. Dinosaur Sprinkles is saying, it was interesting how she blamed Aaron for taking too long to call to get her not arrested when it was still her that got herself kind of arrested. It's funny because that's part of their sibling dynamic. Like, how dare he not realize that she was going to mess up and call earlier? He needs to be faster. Get on it, bro. Got to get her out of jail. He has one job, even though that's not true. He has several jobs. That's one bit of artwork I really like here. It's not overblown, but I'll show it here. The eyes, because they have the Monster Hunters, the Order of St. George, they have, and the other houses and the like, they have these eyes because they have the ability to see, which I can never not say without thinking about They Live. Like, this one can see, but she has the ability to, and there's a really nice bit of foreshadowing here actually in the art, wherein that you have the one panel here of the eyes, it's over there, and then you go down here, awkward to do on the camera, and you see the jewel in her head, which is what allows her to see. And so it's just this nice little thing because they don't reveal that right away, but the panel set it up. And that's, that's a fun thing that they do there. But I like the glow that they give the eyes because it's not too much. It's enough that the reader can see that her eyes are a bit brighter, and it also gives it this sharp contrast against the dark circles. But it's not so much that's the kind of thing that everybody would notice. Like, some people comment, oh, she has the big eyes or the bright eyes, but it's not to the point where she looks supernatural herself. But it's just this nice little detail that's there. I thought that was a neat art detail that I really liked. Anima is saying, glowing eyes always remind me of Danny Phantom. There were some moments where the aggressive paneling I didn't feel worked as well, like some of the conversations like this. This is a moment because I reread this on my phone rather than pulling out the giant tome. And this was one of the moments where the panel to panel was very much appreciated because the flow was a bit less awkward than it is here. And you have the big bend in my page, although I opened it correctly. I don't know if anybody else watched that Gem Mint video from all those years ago about how to open your Omnis. It changed my life. They don't break at the spine anymore. Oh, here's the apple beams, because if they're going to apple beams, they're going to effing apple beams. I'm not cussing today. I don't feel like getting demonetized if I can avoid it. I may have already been because of the children and the monsters killing them. It's the monster's fault, really. No, it's Aaron's fault. The fact that she's trying to do this out in public as well, that she just sits down at this restaurant, pulls out this map and starts charting all the deaths and the caches and the like. It really was her own fault that she got arrested. And at this point, she's been doing it for so long. She just doesn't care. That's what's going on here. So the story does have some of its own, storytelling kind of conceits, and some of them are more fun than others. It's really going to, mileage, as I always say, varies for people. So I should ask, for those who enjoyed it, what was your favorite part of the first arc? M. Cooney is saying, I mean, if she went to a Waffle House, no one would have cared. Is it more or less awkward to be plotting like this? Or those people who go to restaurants and then order the entire menu and then film quietly in the corner? I love to watch those videos, but I always think about, when you watch those skit videos, the vantage point where they pull out and you see the behind the scenes of like the person at the table with all the food. I liked this scene. This was the scene that they had that was kind of like the scene where the principal broke down, but it's one of the fathers breaking down at the bar. And it's just, again, I know it was supposed to be a trauma thing with James, but it just felt awkward. It felt like people dumping on him. And I think it was maybe meant to feel inappropriate and awkward in that way. But it also happened so early in the series before everything has been established fully tone-wise. So you're not entirely sure what you're in for. And I would argue against this having a Twin Peaksy vibe because it's not quirky enough, in my opinion. Like, a lot of dark things happen in Twin Peaks. Like, Twin Peaks is one of my favorite series. There are lots of dark things that happen, and the people are kind of weird, but there's also kind of a quirk and a brightness to it. I think also because the coloring in this too, like Twin Peaks is very bright with the wooden lodge and all of those things, like the actual hotel, not the not the red room and all that stuff. But even that's bright. Like, everything there is bright. The muted tones really give it a very different kind of vibe, Humongous is saying, I haven't been able to get through the first issue, but so far it's good. I know sometimes I've got a lot to read after this. There's today was New Comic Day. What are you what are you picking up? Today's Grumpy Lantern Day, Green Lantern Dark. I didn't forget. Oh, Jace, you were trying to change your name. I see it. The name change came through. Yeah, I know. Sometimes when you change your name or your avatar, you're just waiting for it to show up. It did. It worked out. I'm just flipping through to see if there's anything else that I really want to highlight. Anima is saying, I kind of thought it would have had a little bit of an episodic vibe to it going in. Well, I mean, that's initially what it was going to be, but it definitely pivoted. I like how the highlight is, for many people, is the chainsaw scene. I'm actually there right now. Buying the chainsaws. The following scene of Tommy and his dad, which is meant to showcase kind of what Tommy's life is like. Again, it's not poorly executed or anything like that. You get to see what's happening and people suffering in the town. I don't know. I couldn't connect with it. And the reason I keep coming back to it is I still haven't fully formulated as to why. Lots of times, like, I don't know about all of you. When I'm reading something, I like to look into why I'm reacting to it the way I am and try and figure out what it is that's causing the reaction, whether it's positive, negative, meh. I really like to be able to discern what that is. And I haven't fully been able to parse that out yet. And that part's something that I'm still working on. So that means for me, I'm going to end up rereading this so many times until I can figure out what that feeling is and why. Does anybody else do that? Or are you more of a one time through? Like I read it, I came, I saw, I read, it's over, kind of thing. Peyton is saying, I liked seeing a fantastical character like Erica interact with regular small town people. I'm hoping to see more of that in future issues. Well, it's a mild spoiler, but you will. So you'll get to see that. Ah, I see that. I see that reference. You know what? They should get that chainsaw at S-Mart. Shop smart. Shop S-Mart. You can have fun with the naming of the things. It can be a fun thing. That can be fun world building. I did like this breakdown scene here, actually. I didn't highlight it as of yet, which is the breakdown for James as he's questioning, why did this happen? Like, why are there monsters here? And that's one of the reveals, I think, that is a bit at odds with the whole, or maybe it isn't. Maybe there's a video essay in there somewhere. One of those, like 2 hours long video essay. Like, are we our own monsters? Something is killing the children. It would need a better title than that. Actually, my daughter came up with the tagline for like one of my recent videos. It was really good. I think she's better at naming things than I am. So, have I ever seen the Evil Dead the musical? No, I haven't. I have not. I like Evil Dead, but I haven't kept up with lots of the tie-in stuff or those kind of things as much as I could have. Here's the mask. The mask is great. I love the black mask look. What about you? Do you have any of the other? Because there are other color masks, like there are the white masks, the black masks, the red masks, the like azure, the blue masks, silver masks. Which one do you like? Oh, this page is great. This page is great, but it's gross. Here. This is the cave reveal with all of the children who have been killed because something was killing them. I think this was the first really big, I mean, you saw like his friends get ripped in half and stuff, but there's something about that panel there that's just really visceral, and it really highlights that this series isn't afraid to go for it, even though it already ripped people in half and stuff. I don't know. There's something about this panel specifically that really got to me. Overall, for me, I like this series. I've kept up with it the entire time. I think it's interesting. I think it has some of the character moments don't land quite as well for the characters that aren't Erica or the people that she's directly interacting with. It has some recurring things that just happen as well, like how everybody tells people that they need to have a shower because they stink. But or again, how pretty much everybody who's in a relationship, one of the other people is dead. Just don't romance anybody here. Somebody's gonna die. Don't do it. E Capone, is this DC? No, this is Boom. This is Boom with an exclamation mark. So you gotta say it. Boom. This is from Boom Studios. And the second book, the big deluxe book, if you like deluxes, is out now as well. That came out in May of 2024. So you can feel less stressed. You don't need to live in the world of there only being one compendium like I live in with the Sandman Mystery Theater compendium. There's more. Yeah, the old dragon's metal mask, Dinosaur Sprinkles was saying, was cool, but mostly because it was special. Exactly, because he's the dragon. He's got to have a special mask. Oh, Emma is asking, did she name the cat zombie horror video? No, it was not the cat zombie horror video. I was glad to get to talk about Feral. I think Feral is very interesting. It's one of those things that when you talk about the indies, usually you're not going to get as many hits, but I think it's worth it because I think it's really worth highlighting. And there was a thing that happened recently at Local Man kind of ended, and I think it was like workload versus like monetary reward and stuff like that. And those kind of things always make me sad because I always wonder, I'm like, well, if more people were reading it, would have gotten to keep going. So I'm like, it's good to talk about these things because a lot of times, I think I was talking about in an interview recently, but by the time people hear about them, I think it was with Jim Zub, it was that they're over. And so I think it's important to talk about them as they're ongoing when and if you can, finding a balance between the things that are popular and the things that are still interesting but kind of under the radar. And there's so much exciting work happening right now in all of the spaces. I think comics are really an exciting place right now. It's that great feeling where I find it a great feeling. That great feeling where there's so much to talk about that you kind of have to pick and choose, and I like that. I like that there's so many different comic things to discuss at the moment, you know? Like Absolute Superman is next week. There's the upcoming Justice League stuff. I really like The Moon is Following Us, which is an indie thing. There's the Tin Can Society. I was going to do another horror rec for Spooky Month, but I don't think I'm going to get to it since that's tomorrow. But this counts. This counts as a spooky thing. I enjoy how matte this cover is. It is nice to be able to hold something up and not have it, be blinding all of you. Also, I just realized I put one of the cute bookmarks for my daughter in here, and that's a really amusing juxtaposition inside of this book before it goes back to the secret shelf because it's not appropriate. Oh, Loner Shark. No, people have been talking about it. It's just where they've been talking about it. Jason Aaron's, I don't think he's done as many interviews as other people. I haven't seen as many interviews, at least not on the YouTube space, but there's been a bunch of mainstream outlet interviews with Jason Aaron. But again, less than some of the others. But the preview pages are out of like the first 6 pages for everybody who wants to go and look at, like, those are around and stuff like that if you care to go find them. So it's just one of those things where I think they released them in order of perceived interest, which seems to be fairly accurate in terms of how it's playing out, but we shall see. I'm excited to talk about it. I'm excited to talk about a lot of things. There's just, more retrospectives, more comics, more things. So yes. But we have discussed this for a while. I think Alvin wants to come in, and we're tapering off. I think this was good for a return, to the book club. We discussed, we discussed it. I had quotes, like I had quotes, all that stuff. I think it was good, and I'm looking forward to getting more into the groove. I know it wasn't quite as, smooth, but it's been a while. It's been years. So thank you so much for those who could make it, and of course I'll leave it up for those who couldn't. And it was fun to discuss. I'll put the new vote up for members both on YouTube and Kofi soon, and then we'll be back next month to discuss all of that. And of course I'll be back with more regular videos and streams and the like coming very, very soon. So thank you so much for everybody who was able to take some time out of your day to come and discuss this, and enjoy the rest of your day, night, evening, whatever, and we will be back. All right. I'll see you all soon.